Douglas Noel Adams was an English writer, humorist, and dramatist. Adams is best known as the author of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which originated in 1978 as a BBC radio comedy before developing into a trilogy of 5 books that sold more than 15 million copies in his lifetime and generated a television series, several stage plays, comics, a computer game, and in 2005 a feature film. Adams' contribution to UK radio is commemorated in the Radio Academy's Hall of Fame. Adams also wrote Dirk Gently's holistic detective agency in The Long Dark Tea Time of the Soul, and co-wrote The Meaning of Life, The Deeper Meaning of Life, Last Chance to See, and 3 stories for the television series Doctor Who. A posthumous collection of his work, including an unfinished novel, was published as The Salmon of Doubt in 2002. Adams became known as an advocate for environmentalism and conservation, and also as a lover of fast cars, cameras, technological innovation, and the Apple Macintosh. He was a staunch atheist, imagining a sentient puddle who wakes up one morning and thinks, "This is an interesting world I find myself in an interesting hole I find myself in fits me rather neatly, doesn't it? In fact it fits me staggeringly well, must have been made to have me in it." To demonstrate his view that the fine-tuned universe argument for God was a fallacy. Biologist Richard Dawkins dedicated his book The God Delusion to Adams, writing on his death that science has lost a friend, literature has lost a luminary, the mountain gorilla and the black rhino have lost a gallant defender. Early life: Adams was born on March 11, 1952 to Janet and Christopher Douglas Adams in Cambridge, England. The following year Watson and Crick famously first modelled DNA at Cambridge University, leading Adams to later quip he was DNA in Cambridge months earlier. The family moved to East London a few months after his birth where his sister, Susan, was born 3 years later. His parents divorced in 1957. Douglas, Susan, and their mother moved to an RSPCA animal shelter in Brentwood, Essex, run by his maternal grandparents. Education: Adams attended Primrose Hill Primary School in Brentwood. At 9, he passed the entrance exam for Brentwood School, an independent school whose alumni include Robin Day, Jack Straw, Noel Adams, and David Irving. Griff Rhys-Jones was a year below him, and he was in the same class as stuckist artist Charles Thompson. He attended the prep school from 1959 to 1964, then the main school until December 1970. His form master, Frank Harford, said of him, "Hundreds of boys have passed through the school but Douglas Adams really stood out from the crowd literally. He was unnecessarily tall and in his short trousers he looked a trifle self-conscious." The form master wouldn't say meet under the clock tower, or meet under the war memorial, he joked, but meet under Adams. Yet it was his ability to write first-class stories that really made him shine. Adams was 6 feet tall by age 12 and stopped growing at 6 ft 5 in. He became the only student ever to be awarded a 10 out of 10 by Harvard for creative writing, something he remembered for the rest of his life, particularly when facing writer's block. Some of his earliest writing was published at the school, such as a report on its photography club in the Brentwoodian in 1962, or spoof reviews in the school magazine Broadsheet, edited by Paul Neil Milne Johnston, who later became a character in The Hitchhiker's Guide. He also designed the cover of one issue of the Broadsheet, and had a letter and short story published nationally in The Eagle, the boys' comic, in 1965. A poem entitled A Dissertation on the Task of Writing a Poem on a Candle and an account of some of the difficulties thereto pertaining written by Adams in January 1970, at the age of 17, was discovered by archivist Stacey Harmer in a cupboard at the school in early 2014. In it, Adams rhymes futile with mute, while, and exhausted with of course did. On the strength of a bravura essay on religious poetry that discussed the Beatles and William Blake, he was awarded an exhibition in English at St John's College, Cambridge, going up in 1971. He wanted to join the Footlights, an invitation-only student comedy club that has acted as a hothouse for some of the most notable comic talent in England. He was not elected immediately as he had hoped, and started to write and perform in reviews with Will Adams and Martin Smith, forming a group called Adams Smith Adams, but managed to become a member of the Footlights by 1973. Despite doing very little work he recalled having completed 3 essays in 3 years he graduated in 1974 with a BA in English Literature. Career, writing. After leaving university Adams moved back to London, determined to break into TV and radio as a writer. An edited version of the Footlights review appeared on BBC Two television in 1974. A version of the review performed live in London's West End led to Adams being discovered by Monty Python's Graham Chapman. The two formed a brief writing partnership, earning Adams a writing credit in episode 45 of the Monty Python for a sketch called Patient Abuse. He is one of only 2 people outside the original Python members to get a writing credit. The sketch plays on the idea of mind-boggling paperwork in an emergency, a joke later incorporated into the Vagons' obsession with paperwork. Adams also contributed to a sketch on the album for Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Adams had 2 brief appearances in the 4th series of Monty Python's Flying Circus. At the beginning of episode 42, The Light Entertainment War, Adams is in a surgeon's mask, pulling on gloves, while Michael Palin narrates a sketch that introduces one person after another but never actually gets started. At the beginning of episode 44, Mr. Neutron, Adams is dressed in a pepper pot outfit and loads a missile onto a cart driven by Terry Jones, who is calling for scrap metal. The 2 episodes were broadcast in November 1974. Adams and Chapman also attempted non-Python projects, including Out of the Trees. At this point Adams' career stalled. His writing style was unsuited to the current style of radio and TV comedy. To make ends meet he took a series of odd jobs, including as a hospital porter, barn builder, and chicken shed cleaner. He was employed as a bodyguard by a Qatari family, who had made their fortune in oil. Anecdotes about the job included that the family had once ordered one of everything from a hotel's menu, tried all the dishes, and sent out for hamburgers. Another story had to do with a prostitute sent to the floor Adams was guarding one evening. They acknowledged each other as she entered, and an hour later, when she left, she is said to have remarked, "At least you can read while you're on the job." During this time Adams continued to write and submit sketches, though few were accepted. In 1976 his career had a brief improvement when he wrote and performed, to good review, Unpleasantness at Brodie's Close at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. But by Christmas work had dried up again, and a depressed Adams moved to live with his mother. The lack of writing work hit him hard and a low confidence would become a feature of Adams' life. "I have terrible periods of lack of confidence. I briefly did therapy, but after a while I realized it was like a farmer complaining about the weather. You can't fix the weather in a euro, you just have to get on with it." Some of Adams' early radio work included sketches for the Burkiss Way in 1977 and the News Hotlines. He also wrote, again with Graham Chapman, the 20th February 1977 episode of Doctor on the Go, a sequel to the Doctor in the House television comedy series. After the first radio series of The Hitchhiker's Guide became successful, Adams was made a BBC radio producer, working on Week Ending and a pantomime called Black Cinderella 2 Goes East. He left the position after 6 months to become the script editor for Doctor Who. In 1979 Adams and John Lloyd wrote scripts for 2 half-hour episodes of Dr. Snuggles, The Remarkable Fidgety River, and The Great Disappearing Mystery. John Lloyd was also co-author of 2 episodes from the original Hitchhiker radio series, as well as The Meaning of Life and The Deeper Meaning of Life. Lloyd and Adams also collaborated on a science fiction film comedy project based on the Guinness Book of World Records, which would have starred John Cleese as the UN Secretary-General, and had a race of aliens beating humans in athletic competitions, but the humans winning in all of the absurd record categories. The project never proceeded past a treatment. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy was a concept for a science fiction comedy radio series pitched by Adams and radio producer Simon Brett to BBC Radio 4 in 1977. Adams came up with an outline for a pilot episode, as well as a few other stories that could potentially be used in the series. According to Adams, The idea for the title occurred to him while he lay drunk in a field in Innsbruck, Austria, gazing at the stars. He was carrying a copy of The Hitchhiker's Guide to Europe, and it occurred to him that somebody ought to write a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. He later said that the constant repetition of this anecdote had obliterated his memory of the actual event. Despite the original outline, Adams was said to make up the stories as he wrote. He turned to John Lloyd for help with the final 2 episodes of the first series. Lloyd contributed bits from an unpublished science fiction book of his own, called Gygax. Very little of Lloyd's material survived in later adaptations of Hitchhikers, such as the novels and the TV series. The TV series itself was based on the first 6 radio episodes, and sections contributed by Lloyd were largely rewritten. BBC Radio 4 broadcast the first radio series weekly in the UK in March and April 1978. The series was distributed in the United States by National Public Radio. Following the success of the first series, another episode was recorded and broadcast, which was commonly known as the Christmas episode. A second series of 5 episodes was broadcast one per night, during the week of January 25, 1980. While working on the radio series, Adams developed problems keeping to writing deadlines that only got worse as he published novels. Adams was never a prolific writer and usually had to be forced by others to do any writing. This included being locked in a hotel suite with his editor for 3 weeks to ensure that So Long, and Thanks for All the Fish was completed. He was quoted as saying, "I love deadlines. I love the whooshing noise they make as they go by." Despite the difficulty with deadlines, Adams wrote 5 novels in the series, published in 1979, 1980, 1982, 1984, and 1992. The books formed the basis for other adaptations, such as 3-part comic book adaptations for each of the first 3 books, an interactive text adventure computer game, and a photo-illustrated edition, published in 1994. This latter edition featured a 42 puzzle designed by Adams, which was later incorporated into paperback covers of the first 4 Hitchhikers novels. In 1980, Adams also began attempts to turn the first Hitchhikers novel into a movie, making several trips to Los Angeles, and working with a number of Hollywood studios and potential producers. The next year, the radio series became the basis for a BBC television mini-series broadcast in 6 parts. When he died in 2001 in California, he had been trying again to get the movie project started with Disney, which had bought the rights in 1998. The screenplay finally got a posthumous rewrite by Carrie Kirkpatrick, and the resulting movie was released in 2005. Radio producer Dirk Maggs had consulted with Adams, first in 1993, and later in 1997 and 2000 about creating a 3rd radio series, based on the 3rd novel in the Hitchhikers series. They also discussed the possibilities of radio adaptations of the final 2 novels in the 5-book trilogy. As with the movie, this project was only realized after Adams' death. The 3rd series, The Tertiary Phase, was broadcast on BBC Radio 4 in September 2004 and was subsequently released on audio CD. With the aid of a recording of his reading of Life, the Universe and Everything and editing, Adams can be heard playing the part of Agrajag posthumously. So Long, and Thanks for All the Fish and Mostly Harmless made up the 4th and 5th radio series, respectively, and these were broadcast in May and June 2005, and also subsequently released on audio CD. The last episode in the last series concluded with, "The very final episode of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams is affectionately dedicated to its author." Dirk Gently series. In between Adams' first trip to Madagascar with Mark Carwadine in 1985, and their series of travels that formed the basis for the radio series and non-fiction book Last Chance to See, Adams wrote 2 other novels with a new cast of characters. Dirk Gently's holistic detective agency was first published in 1987, and was described by its author as a kind of ghost horror detective time travel romantic comedy epic, mainly concerned with mud, music and quantum mechanics. It was derived from 2 Doctor Who serials Adams had written. A sequel novel, The Long Dark Tea Time of the Soul, was published a year later. This was an entirely original work, Adams' first since So Long, and Thanks for All the Fish. After the book tour, Adams set off on his round-the-world excursion which supplied him with the material for Last Chance to See. Doctor Who. Adams sent the script for the HHGG pilot radio program to the Doctor Who production office in 1978, and was commissioned to write The Pirate Planet. He had also previously attempted to submit a potential movie script, called Doctor Who and the Cricketman, which later became his novel Life, the Universe and Everything. Adams then went on to serve as script editor on the show for its 17th season in 1979. Altogether, he wrote 3 Doctor Who serials starring Tom Baker as the Doctor, The Pirate Planet, City of Death, Shudder. The episodes authored by Adams are some of the few that have not been novelized, as Adams would not allow anyone else to write them, and asked for a higher price than the publishers were willing to pay. Shudder was later novelized by Gareth Roberts in 2012. Adams was also known to allow in-jokes from The Hitchhiker's Guide to appear in the Doctor Who stories he wrote and other stories on which he served as script editor. Subsequent writers have also inserted Hitchhiker's references, even as recently as 2013. Conversely, at least one reference to Doctor Who was worked into a Hitchhiker's novel. In Life, the Universe and Everything, 2 characters travel in time and land on the pitch at Lord's Cricket Ground. The reaction of the radio commentators to their sudden appearance is very similar to the reactions of commentators in a scene in the 8th episode of the 1965 Euro 66 story The Daleks' Master Plan, which is the Doctor's TARDIS materialize on the pitch at Lord's. Elements of Shudder and City of Death were reused in Adams' later novel Dirk Gently's holistic detective agency, in particular the character of Professor Chronotis. Big Finish Productions eventually remade Shudder as an audio play starring Paul McGann as the Doctor. Accompanied by partially animated illustrations, it was recast on the BBC website in 2003, and subsequently released as a 2-CD set later that year. An omnibus edition of this version was broadcast on the digital radio station BBC 7 on December 10, 2005. In the Doctor Who 2012 Christmas episode The Snowmen, writer Stephen Moffat was inspired by a storyline that Adams pitched called The Doctor Retires. When he was at school he wrote and performed a play called Dr. Witch. Music. Adams played the guitar left-handed and had a collection of 24 left-handed guitars when he died. He also studied piano in the 1960s with the same teacher as Paul Wickens, the pianist who plays in Paul McCartney's band. Pink Floyd and Procol Harum had important influence on Adams' work. Pink Floyd. Adams included a reference to Pink Floyd in the original radio version of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, in which he describes the main characters surveying the landscape of an alien planet while Marvin, their android companion, hums Pink Floyd's Shine On You Crazy Diamond. This was cut out of the CD version. Adams also compared the various noises that the kakapo makes to Pink Floyd's studio outtakes in his non-fiction book on endangered species, Last Chance to See. Adams' official biography shares its name with the song Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd. Adams was friends with Pink Floyd guitarist David Gilmour and, on Adams' 42nd birthday, he was invited to make a guest appearance at Pink Floyd's October 28, 1994 concert at Earl's Court in London, playing guitar on the songs Brain Damage and Eclipse. Adams chose the name for Pink Floyd's 1994 album, The Division Bell, by picking the words from the lyrics to one of his tracks, High Hopes. Gilmour also performed at Adams' memorial service in 2001, and what would have been Adams' 60th birthday party in 2012. Procol Harum. Douglas Adams was a friend of Gary Brooker, the lead singer, pianist and songwriter of Procol Harum. Adams invited Brooker to one of the many parties that Adams held at his house. On one such occasion Gary Brooker performed the full version of A Whiter Shade of Pale. Brooker also performed at Adams' memorial service. Adams appeared on stage with Brooker to perform and held "'Twas in Idlewild" when the band's lyricist Keith Reid was not available. On several other occasions he introduced Procol Harum at their gigs. Adams would listen to music while writing, and this would occasionally influence his work. On one occasion the title track from the Procol Harum album Grand Hotel was playing when Suddenly in the middle of the song there was this huge orchestral climax that came out of nowhere and did not seem to be about anything. I kept wondering what was this huge thing happening in the background? And I eventually thought, it sounds as if there ought to be some sort of flow show going on. Something huge and extraordinary, like the end of the universe. And so that was where the idea for the restaurant at the end of the universe came from. Douglas Adams, Procol Harum at the Barbican. Computer games and projects. Douglas Adams created an interactive fiction version of HHGG with Steve Maritzky from Infocom in 1984. In 1986 he participated in a week-long brainstorming session with the Lucasfilm Games team for the game Labyrinth. Later he was also involved in creating Bureaucracy. Adams was a founder, director and chief fantasist of the Digital Village, a digital media and internet company with which he created Starship Titanic, a Cody Award-winning and BAFTA-nominated adventure game, which was published in 1998 by Simon & Schuster. Terry Jones wrote the accompanying book, entitled Douglas Adams' Starship Titanic, since Adams was too busy with the computer game to do both. In April 1999, Adams initiated the H2G2 collaborative writing project, an experimental attempt at making The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy a reality, and at harnessing the collective brain power of the Internet community. It found a new home at BBC Online in 2001. In 1990 Adams wrote and presented a television documentary program Hyperland, which featured Tom Baker as a software agent, and interviews with Ted Nelson, the co-inventor of hypertext and the person who coined the term. Although Adams did not invent hypertext, he was an early adopter and advocate of it. This was the same year that Tim Berners-Lee used the idea of hypertext in his HTML. Personal beliefs and activism, atheism and views on religion. Adams described himself as a radical atheist, adding radical for emphasis so he would not be asked if he meant agnostic. He told American atheists that this made things easier, but most importantly it conveyed the fact that he really meant it. "I am convinced that there is not a God," he said. Despite this, he remained fascinated by religion because of its effect on human affairs. "I love to keep poking and prodding at it. I've thought about it so much over the years that fascination is bound to spill over into my writing." The evolutionary biologist and atheist Richard Dawkins in The God Delusion uses Adams' influence throughout to exemplify arguments for non-belief. Dawkins jokingly states that Adams is possibly my only convert to atheism. The book is dedicated to Adams, quoting Ford Prefect from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, "Isn't it enough to see that a garden is beautiful without having to believe that there are fairies at the bottom of it too?" Environmental activism. Adams was also an environmental activist who campaigned on behalf of endangered species. This activism included the production of the non-fiction radio series Last Chance to See, in which he and naturalist Mark Carwadine visited rare species such as the kakapo and beige, and the publication of a tie-in book of the same name. In 1992 this was made into a CD-ROM combination of audiobook, e-book and picture slideshow. Adams and Mark Carwadine contributed the Meeting a Gorilla passage from Last Chance to See to the book The Great Ape Project. This book, edited by Paolo Cavalieri and Peter Singer, launched a wider-scale project in 1993, which calls for the extension of moral equality to include all great apes, human and non-human. In 1994 he participated in a climb of Mount Kilimanjaro while wearing a rhino suit for the British charity organisation Save the Rhino International. Puppeteer William Todd Jones, who had originally worn the suit in the London Marathon to raise money and bring awareness to the group, also participated in the climb in the suit. Adams wore the suit while travelling to the mountain before the climb proper began. About £100,000 were raised through that event, benefiting schools in Kenya and a black rhinoceros preservation program in Tanzania. Adams was also an active supporter of the Dian Fossey Gorilla Fund. In 1998, Adams published an essay bemoaning the wasteful profusion and confusion of power adapters, and calling for more standardization. In 2009, the International Telecommunication Union announced support of the Open Mobile Terminal Platform's Common Charging and Local Data Connectivity Standard, which specifies the use of micro-USB receptacles on mobile phones and standard USB receptacles on chargers. The hope is to markedly reduce the profusion of non-interchangeable power adapters needed for each year's new output of mobile phone models. Since 2003, Save the Rhino has held an annual Douglas Adams Memorial Lecture around the time of his birthday to raise money for environmental campaigns. The lectures in the series are, 2003 Richard Dawkins Queerer Than We Can Suppose, The Strangeness of Science, 2004 Robert Swan Mission Antarctica, 2005 Mark Carwadine Last Chance to See. Just a Bit More, 2006 Robert Winston Is the Human an Endangered Species? 2007 Richard Leakey Wildlife Management in East Africa Is There a Future? 2008 Steven Pinker The Stuff of Thought, Language as a Window into Human Nature, 2009 Benedict Allen Unbreakable, 2010 Marcus Du Soto 42, The Answer to Life, the Universe and Prime Numbers, 2011 Brian Cox The Universe and Why We Should Explore It, 2012 lecture replaced by Douglas Adams The Party, 2013 Adam Rutherford Creation, The Origin and the Future of Life, 2014 Roger Highfield and Simon Singh, The Science of Harry Potter and the Mathematics of the Simpsons, Technology and Innovation. Though he did not buy his first word processor until 1982, he had considered one as early as 1979. He was quoted as saying that until 1982, he had difficulties with the impenetrable barrier of jargon. Words were flying backwards and forwards without concepts riding on their backs. In 1982 his first purchase was a Nexus. In 1983, when he and Jane Belson went out to Los Angeles, he bought a DEC Rainbow. Upon their return to England, Adams bought an Apricot, then a BBC Micro and a Tandy 1000. In Last Chance to See Adams mentions his Cambridge Z88, which he had taken to Zaire on a quest to find the northern white rhinoceros. Adams' posthumously published work, The Salmon of Doubt, features multiple articles by him on the subject of technology, including reprints of articles that originally ran in Mac User magazine, and in The Independent on Sunday newspaper. In these Adams claims that one of the first computers he ever saw was a Commodore PET, and that he has adored his Apple Macintosh since he first saw one at Infocom's offices in Boston in 1984. Adams was a Macintosh user from the time they first came out in 1984 until his death in 2001. He was the first person to buy a Mac in Europe. Adams was also an Apple master, one of several celebrities whom Apple made into spokespeople for its products. Adams' contributions included a rock video that he created using the first version of iMovie with footage featuring his daughter Polly. The video was available on Adams' Mac homepage. Adams installed and started using the first release of Mac OS X in the weeks leading up to his death. His very last post to his own forum was in praise of Mac OS X and the possibilities of its Cocoa programming framework. He said it was awesome, which was also the last word he wrote on his site. Adams can also be seen in the omnibus tribute included with the Region 1 NTSC DVD release of the TV adaptation of The Hitchhiker's Guide using Mac OS X on his PowerBook G3. Adams used email extensively long before it reached popular awareness, using it to correspond with Steve Maritsky during the pair's collaboration on Infocom's version of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. While living in New Mexico in 1993 he set up another email address and began posting to his own Usenet newsgroup, alt-fan Douglas Adams, and occasionally, when his computer was acting up, to the Comps's Mac hierarchy. Many of his posts are now archived through Google. Challenges to the authenticity of his messages later led Adams to set up a message forum on his own website to avoid the issue. In 1996, Adams was a keynote speaker at the Microsoft Professional Developers Conference where he described the personal computer as being a modeling device. The video of his keynote speech is archived on Channel 9. Adams was also a keynote speaker for the April 2001 Embedded Systems Conference in San Francisco, one of the major technical conferences on embedded system engineering. In his keynote speech, he shared his vision of technology and how it should contribute in every day a euro, and every man's a euro life. Personal life: Adams moved to Upper Street, Islington, in 1981 and to Duncan Terrace in Islington in the late 1980s. In the early 1980s Adams had an affair with novelist Sally Emerson, who was separated from her husband at that time. Adams later dedicated his book Life, the Universe and Everything to Emerson. In 1981 Emerson returned to her husband, Peter Stothard, a contemporary of Adams at Brentwood School, and later editor of The Times. Adams was soon introduced by friends to Jane Belson, with whom he later became romantically involved. Belson was the lady barrister mentioned in the Jacket Flap biography printed in his books during the mid-1980s. The two lived in Los Angeles together during 1983 while Adams worked on an early screenplay adaptation of Hitchhikers. When the deal fell through, they moved to London, and after several separations and an aborted engagement, they married on November 25, 1991. Adams and Belson had one daughter together, Polly Jane Rocket Adams, born on June 22, 1994, shortly after Adams turned 42. In 1999 the family moved from London to Santa Barbara, California, where they lived until his death. Following the funeral, Jane Belson and Polly Adams returned to London. Jane died on September 7, 2011. Death and legacy: Adams died of a heart attack on May 11, 2001, aged 49, after resting from his regular workout at a private gym in Montecito, California. He had unknowingly suffered a gradual narrowing of the coronary arteries, which led at that moment to a myocardial infarction and a fatal cardiac arrhythmia. Adams had been due to deliver the commencement address at Harvey Mudd College on May 13. His funeral was held on May 16 in Santa Barbara, California. His remains were subsequently cremated and the ashes placed in Highgate Cemetery in North London in June 2002. A memorial service was held on September 17, 2001 at St Martin in the Fields Church, Trafalgar Square, London. This became the first church service broadcast live on the web by the BBC. Video clips of the service are still available on the BBC's website for download. One of his last public appearances was a talk given at the University of California, Santa Barbara, Parrots, the Universe and Everything, recorded days before his death. A full transcript of the talk is available. The Minor Planet Center Space Agency has named an asteroid Arthurdant, coincidentally announcing its plan the day Adams died. There is also an asteroid named after Adams himself. In May 2002 The Salmon of Doubt was published, containing many short stories, essays, and letters, as well as eulogies from Richard Dawkins, Stephen Ferry, Christopher Cerf, and Terry Jones. It also includes 11 chapters of his long-awaited but unfinished novel, The Salmon of Doubt, which was originally intended to become a new Dirk Gently novel, but might have later become the sixth Hitchhiker novel. Other events after Adams' death included a week-cast production of Shudder, allowing the complete story to be told, radio dramatizations of the final 3 books in the Hitchhikers series, and the completion of the film adaptation of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. The film, released in 2005, posthumously credits Adams as a producer, and several art design elements most notably a head-shaped planet seen near the end of the film incorporated Adams features. A 12-part radio series based on the Dirk Gently novels was announced in 2007, with annual transmissions starting in October. BBC Radio 4 also commissioned a third Dirk Gently radio series based on the incomplete chapters of The Salmon of Doubt, and written by Kim Fuller. However, this was dropped in favour of a BBC TV series based on the 2 completed novels. A sixth Hitchhiker novel, And Another Thing, by Artemis Fowl author Eoin Colfer, was released on October 12, 2009, published with the full support of Adams' estate. A BBC Radio 4 book at bedtime adaptation and an audiobook soon followed. On May 25, 2001, 2 weeks after Adams' death, his fans organised a tribute known as Towel Day, which has been observed every year since then. In 2011, Over 3,000 people took part in a public vote to choose the subjects of people's plaques in Islington. Adams received 489 votes, and a plaque is due to be erected in his honor. On March 11, 2013, Adams' 61st birthday was celebrated with an interactive Google Doodle. Works. Articles by others. Notes. References: Adams, Douglas. Is There an Artificial God? Speech at Digital Biota 2, Cambridge, England, September 1998. Adams, Douglas. The Salmon of Doubt, Hitchhiking the Galaxy One Last Time. London, Macmillan. ISBN A0-333-76657-1. Dawkins, Richard. Eulogy for Douglas Adams, in A Devil's Chaplain, Reflections on Hope, Lies, Science, and Love. Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. Felch, Laura. Don't Panic, Douglas Adams and the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Neil Gaiman, May 2004, Ray, Muit K. Atlantic Companion to Literature in English, Atlantic Publishers and Distributors. ISBN 81-269-0832-7, Simpson, M. J. Hitchhiker, A Biography of Douglas Adams, Boston, Massachusetts. Justin, Charles and Company. ISBN A1-932112-17-0. Webb, Nick. Wish You Were Here, The Official Biography of Douglas Adams. Ballantine Books. ISBN 0-345-47650-6. Webb, Nick. Adams, Douglas Noel, Oxford Dictionary of National Biography, Oxford University Press, January 2005. Retrieved October 25, 2005. Further reading: Adams' official website at the Wayback Machine, established by him, and still operated by the Digital Village. Douglas Adams at TED, Douglas Adams' speech at Digital Biota 2, Guardian Books author page, with profile and links to further articles. Works by or about Douglas Adams in libraries, Douglas Adams and his computer article about his Mac I, BBC Two Omnibus Tribute to Adams, presented by Kirsty Walk, August 4, 2001, Muir, Rick and Greengrass, Joel Life, The Universe and Douglas Adams, documentary. Simpson, M.J. The Pocket Essential Hitchhiker's Guide. ISBN 1-903047-40-4. Updated April 2005. ISBN 1-904048-46-3. External links. Media related to Douglas Adams at Wikimedia Commons. Quotations related to Douglas Adams at Wikiquote. Douglas Adams at Find a Grave. Douglas Adams at the Internet Movie Database. Tal Day, May 25.